Imagine a single, pale, balloon-like organ from a fish, so coveted, so wrapped in legend and secrecy, that its value on the black market can surpass 8,000 United States dollars for just 1 kilogram. Not gold. Not diamonds. A swim bladder, the respiratory organ of the totoaba, a fish native only to the turquoise waters of the Gulf of California. Now, imagine this organ at the heart of a shadowy global trade, sparking an ecological crisis so severe that it threatens to erase not just the totoaba from the wild, but also the world's smallest and rarest marine mammal, the vaquita porpoise. Today, we plunge deep into the high-stakes, high-tech, and high-drama world of the totoaba trade. And we ask, why has Mexico, after decades of strict bans and mounting international pressure, suddenly decided to open the gates to legal exports? And what does this mean for the uncertain future of two species hanging by a thread? Let's set the scene. Picture the Gulf of California, sometimes called the Sea of Cortez, a vast, sunlit expanse of water that Jacques Cousteau once described as the aquarium of the world. This is the only place on Earth where the totoaba naturally swims. The fish itself is impressive. It can reach almost 2 meters in length, weigh as much as a full-grown adult human, and live for up to 20 years. But it is the swim bladder, not the meat, or even the size, that draws poachers and smugglers in droves. In certain circles in China, the swim bladder, known as fish maw, is believed to have almost magical properties, promoting youth, healing, boosting fertility, and even conferring prosperity. It is a centuries-old delicacy, often served at grand banquets and weddings, symbolizing good fortune and longevity. Stories of miraculous recoveries, whispered in herbal shops and circulated on online forums, have given the totoaba bladder a near-mythical status among some consumers in China's coastal cities. Over the past 3 decades, this demand has fueled one of the world's most lucrative illegal wildlife trades. The totoaba's swim bladder has earned a grim nickname, the cocaine of the sea. And for good reason. Smuggling networks now operate with the sophistication and ruthlessness of international drug cartels. Totoaba bladders are hidden inside frozen seafood shipments, sewn into car seats, or even disguised as ordinary dried seafood. They travel from remote fishing villages along the Sonoran and Baja California coasts, all the way to the bustling herbal markets of Guangzhou, Hong Kong, and beyond. Some shipments have even made their way to North America and Europe, destined for diaspora communities with a taste for luxury and tradition. To put the scale in perspective, a single kilogram of dried totoaba bladder has fetched prices as high as 8,500 United States dollars in Asian black markets. That is more, ounce for ounce, than the price of pure gold. Some major seizures by authorities have uncovered dozens or even hundreds of swim bladders in a single bust, representing millions of dollars in illicit profits. Law enforcement agencies in both Mexico and China have described smuggling rings that rival those of narcotics, involving corrupt officials, sophisticated logistics, shell companies, and complex money laundering operations. In June of 2024, the Mexican National Guard seized 80 organs believed to be totoaba bladders in a single operation, underscoring the scale and audacity of the trade. But the true cost of this trade goes far beyond economics. It is ecological, and it is existential. The illegal gill nets used to catch totoaba are indiscriminate killers, vaquitas. Small, elusive porpoises with distinctive panda-like markings become entangled and drown, unable to surface for air. Scientists estimate that, as of 2025, fewer than 8 vaquitas remain alive. Fewer than 8 individuals. The entire species could fit inside a single minivan. Every death is a tragedy. Every loss may be irreversible, signaling the potential end of a unique evolutionary lineage. For years, Mexico tried to slam the brakes on this unfolding disaster. In the early 2000s, the country imposed a total ban on totoaba fishing and export. Enforcement, however, has proven to be a monumental challenge. The Gulf of California is enormous. Over 1,000 kilometers of coastline, dotted with hundreds of coves and small fishing communities strung out along the shore. Underfunded patrols and limited resources meant that poachers often operated with near impunity, especially at night or in remote areas. International pressure mounted as conservation groups and scientists sounded the alarm. The United States and China both formally banned imports of totoaba products, while the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, or CITES, listed both the totoaba and the vaquita as critically endangered. Despite these efforts, the shadow economy surrounding totoaba only grew stronger. The rewards were simply too great, and the risks too low. Local fishermen, often facing economic hardship, falling catches, and few alternatives, saw the illegal totoaba trade as a lifeline. Organized crime syndicates moved in, offering cash advances, protection, and sometimes even weapons. The Upper Gulf became a zone of conflict, with environmental activists and law enforcement facing threats, intimidation, and even violence. In some cases, patrol boats have come under fire, and conservationists have been assaulted or chased from local communities. The desperation on the ground is palpable. For some, a single successful totoaba catch can earn more than an entire year's worth of legal fishing. Amid this crisis, a faint but growing glimmer of hope has emerged from an unexpected source: aquaculture. In recent years, innovative fish farmers in Mexico began experimenting with breeding totoaba in captivity. Companies such as Earth Ocean Farms, working in collaboration with marine biologists and geneticists, have developed advanced closed-loop systems that mimic the natural habitat of the fish. These high-tech facilities control water quality, temperature, and diet with precision, aiming to produce healthy totoaba without harming wild populations. Genetic monitoring ensures that farmed fish maintain diversity, reducing the risk of disease and inbreeding. Earth Ocean Farms, for example, has partnered with leading research institutions to study the genetic makeup of both farmed and wild totoaba, to ensure that the captive population remains robust and adaptable. By 2025, the Mexican government saw an opportunity. In July of that year, after intense debate and consultation with local communities, international experts, and environmental groups, Mexico announced a dramatic policy shift. It would allow the export of meat from farm-raised totoaba under strict regulation and rigorous tracking. The goal was ambitious: flood the market with legal, traceable totoaba, drive down the value of black market swim bladders, and, in turn, reduce the incentive for illegal fishing. The policy also promised much tighter surveillance in the upper Gulf of California, including increased patrols, satellite monitoring, and new electronic tracking for every shipment of legal totoaba. The hope is that advanced technology, such as blockchain-based supply chain tracking and DNA barcoding, can make it almost impossible for illegal bladders to be laundered into legitimate shipments. Supporters of the new policy argue that it is a pragmatic, science-driven approach. They point to success stories in other wildlife trades. For example, carefully managed crocodile farms in Australia have all but eliminated poaching by meeting demand with legal, sustainable products. DNA tracing technology, now widely used in the seafood industry, can verify the origin of farmed totoaba, reassuring buyers and regulators alike. Consumers in China, especially the younger generation, are increasingly interested in eco-labels and ethical sourcing. Some herbalists, such as Li Kui, have begun to recommend plant-based alternatives to fish maw for traditional remedies, reducing pressure on endangered fish. In interviews, younger Chinese consumers have expressed skepticism about the supposed miracle qualities of totoaba swim bladder, and are more willing than their parents to choose sustainable alternatives. But not everyone is convinced. Conservationists warn that the legal trade could become a smokescreen for continued poaching. Maria Andrea, a leading fisheries policy expert, cautions. Without ironclad regulation and total enforcement of gillnet bans, the cure could be worse than the disease. Illegal exports might inadvertently boost demand, making illegal smuggling even more profitable. Dr. Sarah Mesnick, a marine biologist, emphasizes the importance of international cooperation. This is not just a Mexican problem. If consumer demand in China and Southeast Asia remains high, and if enforcement is weak at any point in the supply chain, the pressure on wild populations will continue. The vaquita's plight weighs heavily on these debates. Dr. Lorenzo Rojas Bracho, who has spent decades studying the vaquita, is blunt. Unless illegal fishing stops completely, the vaquita will vanish within our lifetime. We are on the edge of extinction. The Environmental Investigation Agency, or EIA, has documented the intricate involvement of criminal networks in the totoaba trade, demonstrating that even a small amount of legal trade can provide cover for large-scale smuggling operations. Carlos Drews, a conservationist, calls for stricter enforcement of gillnet bans, arguing that no trade can be considered safe as long as illegal fishing continues in the vaquita's habitat. The issue is further complicated by international dynamics. The United States, which imports billions of dollars in seafood from Mexico each year, has threatened trade sanctions if Mexico fails to protect the vaquita. China, the main consumer market, has cracked down on some illegal wildlife imports and launched public awareness campaigns, but faces persistent challenges in enforcing bans at the retail and wholesale level. International NGOs and research institutions have called for a coordinated, cross-border response, including intelligence sharing, joint enforcement operations, and harmonized regulations on both sides of the Pacific. Dr. Mesnick argues that only through genuine international cooperation can the cycle of poaching and smuggling be broken. Let's pause and consider the sheer complexity of this situation. On one side, there is the promise of technology. Closed-loop aquaculture, genetic barcoding, blockchain-based tracking, and artificial intelligence-powered surveillance could make it nearly impossible for illegal totoaba to enter the legal supply chain. Earth Ocean Farms, for example, collaborates with scientists to monitor every stage of production, from genetic testing of broodstock to the tagging of individual fish for export. Advanced tagging and DNA sampling can create a digital fingerprint for each fish, offering a model for traceability that could be applied to other threatened species, from sturgeon to seahorses to eels. On the other side, there is the reality of entrenched black markets, long-standing cultural traditions, and economic desperation in coastal communities. The illegal trade is deeply rooted in local economies, where few viable alternatives exist. Smugglers are constantly adapting, using new routes, bribing officials, and exploiting legal loopholes. The risk is that legalizing any part of the trade could actually increase overall demand, drawing in new consumers who were previously deterred by illegality or high prices. In some parts of China, the very act of legalizing a product has been shown to make it more desirable, as it is seen as safer and more prestigious. To better understand the stakes, let's examine historical parallels. The legal trade in crocodile skins in Australia, when coupled with rigorous enforcement and traceability, succeeded in dramatically reducing poaching. However, the legal sale of ivory in parts of Africa and Asia, even under tightly controlled circumstances, led to increased demand and widespread laundering of illegal tusks. The difference, experts say, lies in the strength of regulation and the willingness of governments to back up policies with real resources. So what are the possible futures for the totoaba and the vaquita? Experts envision three main scenarios. First, the optimistic scenario. With rigorous enforcement, transparent tracking, and successful aquaculture, legal farmed totoaba outcompetes poached fish. Consumers, especially in China and Southeast Asia, prefer safe, certified products with eco-labels. Demand for wild-caught bladders collapses, prices fall, and poaching becomes unprofitable. The vaquita, though desperately rare, survives. With luck, continued protection, and perhaps even the reintroduction of individuals bred in captivity, its numbers stabilize and slowly increase over time. This outcome would require unprecedented cooperation between governments, NGOs, scientists, business leaders, and local fishing communities. It would also demand sustained investment in surveillance, enforcement, and public education campaigns in both producer and consumer countries. Second, the pessimistic scenario. Enforcement falters, and the new policy unwittingly stimulates greater demand. Smugglers exploit gaps in the system, blending illegal bladders with legal shipments. Profits soar. The price of totoaba bladders rises to record levels. Some reports suggest up to $8,500 per kilogram on the black market. Illegal gill netting continues unabated. The vaquita, its already tiny population shrinking even further, disappears from the planet. Dr. Rojas Bracho's warning becomes reality. Within our lifetime, the world's smallest porpoise is gone. The extinction of the vaquita would not only be a tragedy for biodiversity, but would also send a chilling signal to conservation efforts worldwide, that even the best technology and international agreements can fail in the face of economic pressures and weak enforcement. Third, a wildcard scenario. Public attitudes in China and other consuming countries shift dramatically. Conservation campaigns, celebrity endorsements, and viral social media stories about the vaquita's plight lead to a cultural reevaluation. Plant-based alternatives and sustainably farmed totoabas become fashionable, with high-profile chefs and food influencers promoting new recipes and health benefits. Maria Andrea, the fisheries analyst, says, "The most powerful weapon against extinction could be an informed consumer. If enough people reject endangered species products, both the totoaba and the vaquita might be saved." This shift could be accelerated by partnerships between NGOs, Chinese celebrities, and popular online platforms such as Weibo and Douyin, reaching millions of young consumers and reshaping social norms. Let's not underestimate the power of consumer choice. In recent years, we've seen similar shifts with shark fin soup, ivory, and rhino horn. In China, campaigns led by celebrities and environmental groups have significantly reduced demand for ivory, helping to slow poaching in Africa. For instance, following a high-profile campaign involving basketball legend Yao Ming, public surveys showed a dramatic decline in willingness to purchase ivory products. Could the same happen with totoaba? The answer depends on education, cultural change, and the willingness of markets to support alternatives. It also depends on policy alignment between producer and consumer countries, so that loopholes are closed and enforcement is synchronized. But what does all this mean for the rest of us? Those who may never see the Gulf of California, or taste totoaba, or glimpse a vaquita in the wild. This story is a window into the challenges facing global conservation in the 21st century. It's a real-time experiment in how technology, economics, and international diplomacy intersect. Closed-loop fish farms, DNA tracking, and global enforcement efforts are not just tools for saving a single species. They are blueprints for addressing similar crises, from pangolins in Africa to eels in Europe to songbirds in Southeast Asia. Each case involves a complex mix of cultural values, economic incentives, and technological capabilities. The lessons learned from totoaba could be applied to a wide range of endangered species facing similar threats. There are also broader lessons for food security and sustainability. The global demand for seafood is rising rapidly. By the year 2050, the world's population could approach 10 billion people, and wild fisheries alone will not be able to meet this demand. Sustainable aquaculture, if done right, could provide healthy, affordable protein while reducing pressure on overexploited oceans. But it also carries risks: disease outbreaks, genetic pollution, habitat loss, and social conflict. The story of the totoaba is a microcosm of these global challenges. It shows how new technologies, such as biosecure recirculating systems, automated feeding, and real-time water quality monitoring, can reduce environmental impacts, but also how social dynamics and market forces must be carefully managed to avoid unintended consequences. Practical advice for all of us? Be an informed consumer. Ask where your seafood comes from. Support retailers and restaurants that prioritize traceability and sustainability. Look for certifications from reputable organizations, and do not hesitate to ask questions at the point of sale. Advocate for science-based policies and transparent supply chains. Your choices, no matter where you live, send signals up and down the market, shaping the incentives for producers, regulators, and even poachers. Even small actions, such as sharing information on social media or supporting conservation groups, can make a difference. And remember, this is not just about fish or porpoises. It's about the values we bring to our global economy. Do we prioritize short-term gains? Or do we recognize the long-term costs of extinction? Are we willing to invest in new technologies and international partnerships, even when the path forward is uncertain and success is not guaranteed? Let's reflect briefly on history. The vaquita was only described by scientists in the 1950s, a blink of an eye in evolutionary time. In less than one human lifetime, we have driven it to the very edge of oblivion. But history is not destiny. There are inspiring examples of species brought back from the brink. The California condor, which once dwindled to fewer than 30 individuals. The black-footed ferret, thought to be extinct until a small population was discovered and bred in captivity. The Arabian oryx, which was reintroduced to the wild after disappearing entirely from its native range. Each recovery required vision, resources, and global cooperation, as well as public support and the involvement of local communities. As we watch the next chapter of the totoaba saga unfold, the stakes could not be higher. Will Mexico's bold gamble become a model for balancing conservation and commerce, or a cautionary tale of unintended consequences? Will technology and transparency win out over corruption and greed? Or will the world's smallest porpoise become just another name on the long list of species we have lost? There is also a human dimension to this story. For many coastal communities in Mexico, the totoaba has been both a blessing and a curse, a source of income, but also a source of conflict and danger. Efforts to promote alternative livelihoods, such as ecotourism, sustainable aquaculture, and community-based conservation, are underway but require sustained investment and support. Success stories from other regions, such as community-managed marine reserves in the Philippines or sustainable seaweed farming in Indonesia, show that win-win solutions are possible when local people are empowered and benefit directly from conservation. The answer, ultimately, lies not just with governments and corporations, but with ordinary people. Scientists developing new genetic tools, fishermen testing new gear, consumers making ethical choices, activists raising awareness, and yes, viewers like you. The fate of the vaquita and the totoaba is a test of our collective will. Can we find solutions that are both ethical and effective, guided by science and compassion? If you care about the future of our oceans, about the power of technology to solve real-world problems, and about the choices that shape our planet, this story is for you. Stay informed, stay curious, and remember, every action, no matter how small, can ripple across the world. If you want more stories about how economics, technology, and conservation are shaping our future, hit subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments, and join the global conversation. Together, perhaps we can tilt the odds just enough in favor of hope and ensure that the story of the